Hello everybody, it's Miss Darling in the studio, and I know I've been away for a bit. I needed a break, and I just had a lot of other creative work I wanted to do, and so I took some time off. I may do it again. Anyway, happy to be back. I think I stalled on this video because it involved having to go around and gather a bunch of stuff, and I was just being a bit lazy, to be honest. This is part 2 of my sharing the tools and supplies, ephemera, and resources that I use, some on a very regular basis and others, from time to time. Some I never use because it's out of sight and I forget I even have it. So that's one of the drawbacks of gathering a lot of supplies. But I think it's important, particularly if you're doing this as a business, that you well stock yourself. It's really difficult, I think, to be creative when you don't have the right products handy to do what you want to do. It stifles creativity and adds to frustration and procrastination. So I'm not showing you all this and saying you have to get all of this. No, you get it if you want it, if you need it. And you don't have to do it all at once. I certainly didn't. I'm going to be showing you a lot of things that I have collected over several years, and not something that I just went out and bought a whole heap of things all at once. So you have to make the decisions as to what's right for you. Now, if you haven't seen part 1, I will link it in the description box below, so be sure and watch that. But we're carrying on with part 2. I expect this to be at least a 4-part series, perhaps 5, to cover everything I would like to just kind of, let you in on. So we're going to kick it off with paper, and the kind of paper that I use. Just because I use it and show it to you doesn't mean that you have to use the same thing, nor the same brands. In fact, many of the things I'll show you, it really doesn't matter what brand you use, as long as it's a quality brand. And you need to think in terms of what you're going to use it for. Are you going to use it in a way that you want to preserve it forever without it yellowing? If so, then you want to get acid-free paper. But if, you don't mind if it yellows and browns up like vintage paper does, then, any paper will do. So one of the things that you'll want probably is just some regular white or off-white paper. 20-pound bond, doesn't matter what the brand is. It's a good paper to print off things that you might want, lists or invoices and letters and things of that nature, but maybe not necessarily you want to use. It's a bit porous, so you don't get a really crisp image. If you are trying to print ephemera on it, I wouldn't recommend you go with a 20-pound bond. 24-pound is a little bit thicker paper, a little bit nicer, but again, not really the kind of paper that I would use if I'm printing off a focal point or ephemera that I really want to come out nice. Now, I started out thinking that really the only kind of paper you could get a really quality image for your focal points on was photo paper, but that's not true. I discovered, I have an HP inkjet printer. It's a flatbed printer, so I can stick thick things on top or books or whatever if I want to scan or copy. And those kind of printers cost a little bit more than the kind that you kind of feed in. But I've always had a flatbed printer. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So anyway, because it's an inkjet, I was focused on buying paper appropriate for inkjets and not laser paper. But I happened to pick up a ream of, this is HP 32 laser paper. And my goodness, I get such fabulous reproductions using this paper. Now, it's not as porous, you see, as some of the other paper, but it's a whole lot cheaper than photo paper. And so you might want to consider it for much of your ephemera. And then if you have something really, really special that you really want the highest quality, then go into some photo paper. I'll show you some that I have in a minute. But anyway, this is laser paper. The only drawback to this is if you have a strong, color, a large area of color or black or whatever, when you go to glue it down in your journal or whatever you're going to do with it, don't use a bone folder to go over it because it will mar. And so you have to be careful on that end. And I've kind of ruined stuff, but it's junk journal, so who cares whether it gets a little destroyed. But you might care, especially if you're selling something or giving it away as a gift. Anyway, this 32 weight laser paper on the inkjet really does a nice quality. You'll also want some cardstock, and I have several types of cardstock in different colors. And because you could print, let's say you have a page full of text. If you print it on this, you're going to have like an off-white background. On this, you'd have a yellow background. And as you go into the darker browns, it starts looking just automatically more vintage for you. So I got this yellow paper by mistake. I would not have gone out and just chosen to buy yellow paper. So I use it for junk stuff that, in order to get rid of it. But I certainly would consider, different colors in the browns and, of course, black. And I use the black mainly for making a frame. Let's say I have an image of a figurine that I want to glue onto other paper, but I want it to stand out and look a little more important, like it was actually framed. Well, I'll pull out my black or dark brown cardstock and glue it to that. It, gives the image a lot more protection, but is great to help create more contrast with the background. So you can get off-whites, you can get bright whites. HP is a good brand. If you have a Staples or Home, what is it called? Depot. Office Depot. If you have one of those kind of stores, go and choose. Try to, see a sample of the paper before you buy a whole ream of it. But it's nice to have different stock available to use depending on your purpose. This is 12 by 12 inch scrapbook paper. And I started out with a lot of scrapbook paper. And eventually I merged into doing a lot more collage and colorizing my own paper and using a jelly plate to make awesome backgrounds. And so I don't use the cardstock so much, but what I do is I bought packs, and rather than just single images, if I saw a pack, particularly if it was on sale, and I would buy it, and of course there's always papers in there that you don't like, you don't use. Well, if you have something that you don't care for, and it's not printed on the back, use the back. For instance, if you have a jelly plate use the front or, either side and just, put some paint on it and be done with it and use it up. So everybody has their taste. Maybe you're into a lot of grungy things of this nature that this type of paper would be good for. Maybe you're more into kind of a French Florentine type of imagery. So there's all kinds of paper out on the market to choose from, and look for sales. Save some money wherever you can. Okay, now there are other, let me get to the photo paper next, and then we'll go on. So I started out first buying some of this Canon inkjet photo paper. It's pretty pricey. You only get 50 sheets. This is 45 pounds, 170 GM. It's matte. I'm not going to say I don't recommend glossy paper, but most of the paper that you're going to deal with, that, the other type of paper is all matte. And so you probably will want, when you're, printing off an image that is really important to you, it's going to be a focal point, instead of, do it on matte paper so it blends better with the other papers that surround it. And don't use the gloss. But you can get beautiful imagery. This is 8.5 by 11, made by Canon. And, it makes beautiful reproductions, but again, it's quite expensive. Then I found this is Epson's presentation matte paper, and this is 8.5 by 11, comes 100 sheets in the box, and it is 27 pound, so it's a little thicker than like your 24 pound paper, and it's a really nice quality, and you'll get a really good reproduction from that for a lot less money. So, these are a couple things. I'm sure other people have other papers that they prefer using. Obviously, if you have a laser, you probably want to focus in on laser paper, and I'm, focused in on inkjet paper. But, so those will give you super quality for your focal point imagery. Okay, I'll deal first with some of this other that comes in packs. I have an art store that I buy a lot of my goods from. They're a discount art supply store. But, you have to look at what's available to you. And, of course, a lot of things you can purchase online from Amazon or, other art supply stores that have websites. You'll probably want some tracing paper. Tracing paper is very thin. I have been able to pull tracing paper. Some people, I think, call it vellum. And I have been able to print that, run that through my printer successfully. It is a little risky. I tried some calligraphy the other day, and it pulled the first sheet through just fine, and I thought, oh, great. I can print on calligraphy paper. And the second sheet got all jammed up inside. I wound up having to take my printer over to the repair shop, and they were nicely able to get the paper out, opening up an area I didn't know opened up. And but if I want to trace over an image to use, tracing paper is great. But you can also draw and make marks on it, and it's nice because it's a bit transparent. It's not hugely transparent. I mean, you can see when you cut cut your edge depending on what you're gluing your cutout piece from. You probably will still be able to see the cut edge of the paper, but sometimes it's really nice to have something that you can glue down and have the background show through. And so tracing paper is good for that. This is Strathmore, 50 sheets. This is 9 by 12, 25 pound or 41 GM. And this is their Series 300. And, you know, it's a good quality paper. I don't think that it is archival. It doesn't say that it is. Probably isn't. Maybe not. No tracing paper is. This is a palette. It's a disposable palette. So I have this, and when I'm painting, I'll set this beside my working area, and I can put paints on here and mix on here, and when I get it full and it's no longer too helpful to me, I'm losing my focus there. So, you know, just rip the sheet off, and then I have a clean palette underneath. So that's something to consider rather than going out and buying a palette that you have to then clean up. This is 9 by 12, comes 50 sheets in a pad, and it's made by Seth Cole. And I'm sure there's other brands that are equally good, but this is a nice way to go, I think. So now I make my papers from scratch normally, and I want something that's nice and thick. I'm losing my focus again. So I use mat board. Now mat board is thicker than anything I've showed you up to this point, but it's a little bit bendable, but not much. And so it makes a great top cover and back cover. You'll need 2 sheets. What I do is, this is 8.5 by 11, and I cut this in half, and then I take a second sheet and I cut out my spine from the second sheet, and I cut it depending on how many pages or signatures I'm going to put in that particular journal. And you know, one signature will take about 1 inch, maybe a little less, 3/4 of an inch for a decent one signature journal, and then a good 1 inch or a little bit wider for a 2 signature. And then of course, if you're going to have multiple signatures, you're going to probably go into 2-3 inches wide, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I like mat board. Again, you can buy it from an art supply store, you can get it from Amazon, and I try to buy it in the size that comes closest to what I'm going to use it for. And so there you have that. And of course, you can always take books and get rid of the pages on the interior, and then use the cover of a hardbound book that you can buy cheaply at the dollar store, Dollar Tree. I've even bought books at my local library. They have a book sale area where they decide what they want to put in there at a drastic discount, and so I shop it there periodically as well. But it's really easy to find normally old books that, you know, nobody cares about, nobody's reading. You can, you know, buy them for $1 or $2 and use that cover and spine. And so to each his own, do what works for you. Okay, so I thought I would show you some of the papers that I've talked about that I have either run through my printer or have used on a jelly plate, and to give you an idea. This is a part of a piece that was just regular 20-pound bond paper, and I came up with this design using my jelly plate. This is a piece of tracing paper or vellum paper, and I use this to, wipe off my brayer. And so over the course of painting various colors and wiping them all in different directions onto this paper, you can see you get a really nice abstracted background, and you're not therefore wasting any of your excess ink. Here is part of a jelly print that I made, and this was on again, bond paper, 20-pound, and I like using the 20-pound with the jelly plate because it prints nicely and holds the ink nicely, and it's more pliable because it's lighter weight. And so definitely use your regular bond paper on your jelly plate. Here's another one. You can see there was many different layers on top, and this was bond paper. Here is some book paper. This was not a vintage book. It was, kind of a recent book that I tear up and I use for, just wiping off my excess paint and whatnot. And you can see that I cut a circle out of here to use to collage onto a collage that I was working on. And, it's neat because the text shows through the paint. And so taking those dollar store books and taking out the guts of them to use to glue, as a surface that you can glue on and then just throw away. Consider using them also as a wipe up to excess paint, and then you can use that for collaging. Now here's a sheet. This was newsprint. I bought a whole ream of I don't think it was 8.5 by 11. I think it was 5 by 7 paper. I bought a whole bunch of it to use with my jelly plate for things I don't care about or for sopping up extra ink, but using them as just like you would a regular print. They come out real nice and real grungy. This is newsprint as well. And so you see those can be great pieces that you can, rip out. As you can see here, I tore out a section to use in a collage. I have a jelly plate that is 9 by 12, but maybe I'm using paper that's 8.5 by 11. So that leaves an inch of ink at the bottom or the top that isn't getting used by that single sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. So I'll take my newsprint and lay it down over that exposed 1 inch and then pull it off. And you see, I'm automatically making my own washi tape. So I think that's fun, and it's a great way to save that ink to have for other purposes. Here was another one that I did, and you can see there's several different jelly plate passes, several layers that I pulled from, and then I took a white gel pen and did some faux calligraphy on that, and I have it to use in my collages. I have a ton of rice paper on hand. Here's an example. This is a Japanese rice paper, and the calligraphy is pre-printed on it. You can see that it's has a very hairy. Let me see if I can get that up to you. has a very hairy tear that you get from it. And I have all different kinds of rice paper that I will pull out and use. For instance, I don't just make junk journals, or actually mine aren't junk journals, they're collage journals, but I also decoupage on vases. And so here's something I'm working on right now. This is a large, heavy, I don't know what the kind of glass it is, but you see them all around where it's a green glass and it's very thick, very heavy. And so I am decoupaging it with all of these various rice papers that I have. And this is going to be a Christmas gift for someone I love, and hope it turns out well in the end. And so, you know, you can get lots of beautiful rice papers. You can get them online. You can also usually get them from your local art supply store. And they're just, you know, beautiful. They can be pricey, and they've, of course, gone up in price like everything else. But it's great to, like this is rice paper there, and so is this. This is vellum paper that I wiped my brayer on and got various textures and colors and different layers on it, and decided to use that as part of this vase. And I'm also using some, you know, of the vellum paper that has, you know, the Japanese calligraphy on it. Here are just a few of the papers I've collected over time. And you can see some of them are just really elaborate and have this gold ink on them. So I have a large, tall basket in the corner of my studio. I roll these up and stick them in there. I used to put several sheets together in a roll, but then I forget what's on the inside because I can only see what's on the outside. So now I've gone to taking the time and effort to roll each sheet up separately so that I don't forget what I have, because if you forget what you have, which is easy to do, especially when you're old like me, but when you gather lots and lots of supplies, you're not going to remember everything you have. So if you don't see it, you're not going to use it, and then it's money down the drain. So this is how I store my rice papers. Now, this is a sheet of tissue paper. You know, this is tissue paper, the kind of paper that is usually stuck in and around gifts that you give away or that you receive. And so I save everything, and even if it's been used and it's wrinkly, doesn't matter to me, because sometimes I'll just take a sheet and deliberately scrunch it up and wrinkle it up on purpose. So I don't care what condition it comes in, even if it's torn, I'll use it. So this is just ink pens of various types and thicknesses that I did some faux calligraphy on, and you know, it tears easy. Do not try to put this through a printer though, because it's just way too thin and you can really ruin your printer. Here is another sheet of tissue paper where I have stamped on it. I have a stamp that has all these grungy looking circles on it, and so this is great. Tissue paper or calligraphy paper is the best thing you can use. In fact, I think this is calligraphy paper. Yeah, this is tissue paper, and this is calligraphy paper. And they're both really fine. It's a little bit difficult to tell them apart, but they have a different texture to them. But they tear great, and they're fabulous for collage. And the thing about calligraphy paper or tissue paper, that you tear it off so that it's ragged, and then when you glue it down to something, you know, collage that you're making, those edges almost disappear altogether. Unlike the vellum. The vellum, you're going to see those cut or torn edges, but the edges on that almost disappear. Now here's a sheet of vellum. Shows you what it looks like when it's plain. It is, you know, just like this this is a little bit foggier maybe in terms of seeing what's below. This is a little bit more transparent, but again, the edges of that are going to show even if you rip it up. And so, you know, everything has a plus and a minus. And here you can see that I ran this sheet of vellum through my printer and got this calligraphy transferred onto vellum instead of just printing it on a regular sheet of white paper. So that gives you an idea of different kinds of paper. Here is Glad's. Oh, this, let me say that for a minute later. You can also tear up a sheet of, what do I want to call this? Glad wrap, whatever. It's got, you know, it's you know, got a design embossed into it, but, you know, you can take this and you could spray it with ink or paint and, you know, colorize it that way. It would bleed quite a bit on it. This is what I use to mop things up, but you could also use it to add to a artwork in terms of a collage. And this is a dried up sheet of baby wipe. I have baby wipes here on hand to clean up my surfaces after I've painted and got my hands all nasty and my surface all messed up. I'll use the wet baby wipes, but then I save, if they're not too ugly looking when I'm done, I'll save them and dry them out. And then these can be used in my collage work. And, you know, you can spray on them. Again, it's very porous, like, I was going to say tissue paper, but I can't think of the word now. But anyway, you get the drift. And so I have some unbleached waxed paper, not very good for painting on, and but great for, you know, making little cellophane type envelopes that you can stick through. It is semi-transparent. It's got a lot of wax on it. So that's why it's not advisable to try to paint on it or to use your brayer ink or to put it on a jelly press, because there's just too much wax there. Your paint's probably never going to dry, or, you know, just be messy. But anyway, I have taken these and cut them down to size and include them in a junk journal just as an extra page. And of course you could glue onto them as well. I have this Glad press and seal, and it's a sealing wrap, kind of like your cling, but it has a little bit of a different surface. This is not for using as a, to paint on. But, for instance, if you have a, I didn't replace mine on this. Shame on me. I have this little jar, little container of gold ink. And when you have ink or paint that's, very liquid, and you don't use it all that often, once you open it up, then the air gets to it and can dry it out, and nothing more devastating than to open something that you've had for a while and it's all dried out inside. So I didn't use it on this, but I have some, maybe it was the Distress medium I used recently. Anything that you have where the substance inside is fairly close to the surface, rip off a piece of this that's bigger all the way around the diameter of the container, and then put that in there and press it down so that it is touching the paint or whatever you've got in the jar, and then put your top on, because what that does is it really reduces the amount of air that's in the jar, and it's the air that dries out your whatever's in there. So that's why I have some of this, to help preserve some of my supplies, because it's expensive and there's nothing worse than finding, something all dried out on you and is no longer usable. Some things can dry out and you can reactivate them with water, but some things cannot be revived at all. So that's just a little tip I throw in there since I'm dealing with the subject of paper. So I think that pretty much covers, if I think of anything else. Of course, there's other papers that I use if I am looking for stuff to put into a journal, and maybe I want a coffee diet or tea diet. Maybe I'll look for some, college lined school paper. It's got the lines in it, and I'll use some of that, or some envelopes. I've coffee dyed envelopes and postcards and things of that nature. You'll want to probably have some of that on hand. Whether you coffee dye or tea dye it is immaterial. It's just nice to have all these different things that are in the size you want them to be in, so you don't have to go cut them specially out of, larger sheets. And so I have, for instance, I got these from Amazon, and this is I think it came like 100 of them or so. This, where, it just says place stamp here, and it's got a place for the address, and then you can, collage whatever you want to on the reverse side. And so I don't have to go actually make a card this size. I've got a bunch of them on hand. This I bought, I think, from Amazon. These are postcards too, but they've already got the kind of a French vintage image of some sort printed on them. But you can find them blank, and so just think about different things that you might want to incorporate in a journal, whether it's a page or whether it's an insert or something like that. And it's nice to, if you can afford it and have room to store it, to build up your supplies so you've got everything handy that you might want at a particular time for a particular purpose. So that's it on paper. I'm going to take a break and come back and we'll tackle a different subject. Okay, I'm back. Let's talk fabric. The one fabric that I think is a must-have is muslin. And muslin is very inexpensive, 100% cotton. You don't want to get one that is real thick and stiff. You want it to be, fairly thin and very flexible. And muslin makes a great, a background onto which you can glue, you can write, you can paint, you can sew, and it gives you many different options, and you can make patterns from it. It's just really cheap. And I have a group here. This one has muslin on top, and that's muslin. I have some other types of fabric that I picked up somewhere along the way. I don't know what, but I intend to make a fabric journal, and so that's why I've got these kind of cut up and folded here all together, ready to make into something at some point. So then I like to cover my journals with fabric because I just think over the long haul they'll hold up much better than paper, unless you're putting a glaze on top of the paper. You're going to find, the fingerprints and tears and rips and things like that can really damage the look and feel of something. So I generally like to use fabric. Well, you don't need a whole yard of fabric to cover a journal. And if you're like me, once you've covered a journal in one fabric, you're probably not too interested in using it again. And so that's kind of a waste of money unless you just absolutely love the pattern, the design, the colors, whatever, and you can only get it by the yard or half yard or something, which apparently is something that happened to me. I think that maybe I was going to make a tablecloth or, I don't know, something. So anyway, I have a ton of this. I have used it on one journal so far that I have filmed, and so what am I going to do with all this? This is a fabric too that I absolutely loved, and I was willing to buy by the yard. I've used this several different times. I even have a clear glass vase that I decoupaged, and I used this fabric in the background for that. And so it's just, just one of those things that I love and was willing to get more fabric. But normally I will just buy fat quarters. And you can, if you go to Amazon and you type in fabric fat quarters into your search bar, it'll pull up all kinds of people selling batches of several different colors that go together. And like this is all part, I don't know if that one was, but these were all part of a batch of green and blue, and they're usually fairly color coordinated. And so that's how I started out really buying most of my fabrics, is fat quarters, which is plenty large enough to do an entire front, back, and spine of a journal and still leave you plenty of fabric left over to use on the interior in some way. Here's another one that was part of a bundle, and you see it was all black and white. images that were part of this, and they're all fat quarters. And then I, pick and choose what I want. Usually I won't use something of this nature for a cover. It's just not interesting enough. But I have used this fabric here on a cover, and lo and behold, I think it was a Christmas journal too, which is an odd choice of color for Christmas, but it turned out and looked fabulous, I thought. Anyway, so fat quarters. You can also find fabric for sale that is cut into quilting squares of maybe 6 by 6 or 8 by 8. You can also find paper, especially from Tim Holtz. You can find lovely paper that is in those sizes. And I like batik, and so I always have a nice supply of these. They're very, very loose, abstract, they look like kind of a watercolor, and very colorful and blending, and so I like using those fabrics. And I'll use those for trims, for pockets, for tying, for creating the tassel that goes on the outside. I'll, rip off pieces and use in tassels. So, it's a great way to go. But, if you go into the quilting squares, they're not that big, and so you're far more limited in how you can use those apart from a quilt. So anyway, I prefer the fat quarters, but try not to buy fabric by the yard unless you're going to make a dress or something like that too. Then you'll want to have a supply of lace. And now this is all lace that came white or off-white, and I have tea-dyed it. And so you can see that's all different kinds. This is a muslin piece that I think I dyed, and I sprayed it with various alcohol sprays and whatnot, which got this mottled look here, which I love. And I love anything coffee or tea dyed. And you can see I have a wide variety of things. I'll tell you in a minute how I acquired all of this. These are napkins. I just purchased a bunch of white napkins, and I use some of them in their white state, and then I have tea dyed the rest, and they will find a home someday in another journal. These are pieces of scripture that I bought and have used. Came in a large sheet, and I tore up, and have used those in a journal, which I will film pretty soon and show you. So you can see I have collected lots of different types of lace, from real thin rolls of lace, machine made, to embroidery type. Some of these may have been placemats, may have been tablecloths, may have just been sold by the larger the piece. So, you just buy what appeals to you and you think will work well for you sometime immediately or in the future. This is just a bit of netting that came attached to something I ordered in the mail, and I didn't throw it away. I thought, that's pretty cool. I can use that somehow, some way. And so I have saved it, and it's here with my fabrics. you'll also want to stock up on some trims. And I have a little wooden drawer cabinet that I purchased at a antique fair, and it has 7 drawers. This was the thickest drawer with these little handles. Anyway, as this was on the bottom, and as you go up, the drawers get thinner. So I had purchased all kinds of trims in various colors over the years, and so I divided them by color. And you see this particular drawer is full of black and gold mainly, but so there's some black and silver in there. And then my other drawers have other colors in it. So whenever I need a trim, I usually make my decisions first based on color, and so that's why dividing things up by color is a good way to go. And then you don't have to rummage through unnecessary things looking for the right color for your project. You'll also want some tulle, and I have acquired a ton of tulle, and the way I've done it is not to go buy tulle, but to go to secondhand stores, thrift stores, where they sell clothing. And I look in the adult section, in the big adult section, because then you're going to get more for your money. And I look for decorative clothing. And sometimes I can get a really good price, and sometimes they're just more than I want to pay. But don't forget also to visit the children's department, because I have found some really fabulous fabrics, tulle and satin and lace of all kinds, in costume and dress-up dresses for little girls in the children's section. I bought this one dress, and I was willing to pay, I think, $3 or more for it, and discovered when I got to the checkout that that particular ticket was 50% off. So I got this really cool dress. I had it put out so that I could show it in this video, and it took me so long to getting around to doing it. I put it away somewhere. I cannot, for the life of me, remember where I stuck it. So in a future, if I ever find it, I'll probably pull it out and show it. But it was this great little child's dress for maybe like a 3 or 4 year old, and it was just full of all kinds of tulle in various colors. So I have every color under the sun in lace and tulle and satin by visiting thrift stores and just buying clothing, dress up, party dresses and stuff. I've also found various beautiful fabrics for backgrounds that are a more luxurious type by going to and looking at tablecloths and placemats and robes, nightgowns, something like that. So just browse looking for things that interest you, that you'd like to incorporate in your projects, and buy it that way. Do not go to a store and purchase rolls of this. I have purchased all kinds of satin ribbon, and in various sizes, some in new packaging, but then I've also acquired a lot of that in trims and bundles and junk stuff, things that I found packaged up at my local thrift store. I have a large Savers about 4 blocks from me, and every Tuesday, as an older woman, I get a special discount, so I try to go there on Tuesdays if I'm in need of something, and can get quite a good price on things that I can tear up. I have sat and watched TV and ripped apart many a dressy dress, and I felt bad about doing it, but I needed the trims. I needed, you can find some really lace, some applique. If you just go and try to buy fancy applique by itself, you'll pay a fortune. So don't do that. What I have done is there are places I found on Amazon where you can buy fancy jewel-laden sari silk. And so this is one place I got substantial pieces of, just gorgeous, that can be used as a topper somewhere, maybe on a, to line a page, or to split out and cover for, a dressy pocket or something like that. And so these were really fun to get, and all different colors. And I mean, to just go and buy something, on a shelf that it's just too expensive. At Etsy, you can type in trims, and you'll find tons of sellers on Etsy. These are some of the finer, really decorative, and I like a lot of the eyelash trims, and so I got these, they maybe will come on a card. I have even taken some that just came bundled up and cut up my own cards out of cardstock, and then, wrapped them around myself, trying to separate them by color or style or something. So these are great to have, but grow into it. It's not something you've got to go out and acquire right off the bat. But if you decide you want to incorporate fabrics in with the paper that you're working with on your products, then there's just no limit to what's out there and available to you. And if you're a smart shopper, you'll find a way to get it for less. And if you have to, you can always ask friends and relatives if they have some dressy garments they haven't worn in years, and would they like to donate to you for your business. Let them know you're going to be taking it apart and cutting it up and using it, but giving it a new life and a new purpose. And so there's nothing better than free. And so that's the way to go. My sister, as some of you may know, was in the bridal alteration business. She sold wedding gowns and gowns and things for the bridesmaids. And so I let her know I was looking for lace, and she sent me this gigantic box that just blew me away, full of all different kinds of lace pieces, things that she had just laying around and no purpose for them. So she was very happy to share all that with me, and that's how I got started. And actually it hooked me on fabric and incorporating fabric in my journals to dress them up and make them look plush and glamorous. So to each his own. That's kind of it for this round. And so in the next, let's see, we've covered, I've got this list, and I've got all that to do yet. So we covered paper and fabric. Next time I'll get into storage ideas and the way I have managed my stuff. We're going to go through a whole list of supplies that you could consider having on hand, and a whole list of ephemera, and ending with resources, specific things I have purchased and where I got them, who I work with and who I look to for inspiration. So I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover in these two particular categories, and I hope it's been helpful to you and inspiring, and that's it for this time. Thanks for being with me, and I hope, as I said, that you got something from this, and if you did, give me some love, and check the like box, ask questions, and I will be back with part 3 later, and give you the rest of the scoop. So, thanks for being with me. This is Miss Darling, calling this a wrap. Bye-bye.